Welcome to RPG Week. Well, at least it feels like RPG Week. I did Behind Enemy Lines, a World War II role-playing game, and Recon, a Vietnam role-playing game. And continuing on, I'm going to page through the Morrow project, 3rd edition. This was printed in 2017. The original Morrow project was printed in 1980 and was introduced to me by a friend, the same friend that I mentioned in the Recon video that I played Recon with. Also did the James Bond role-playing game from Victory Games that was one of their more popular RPG titles. Did that with him, and also he was the one that, if you've seen past videos where I mentioned Grail Games or Divine Right, which I played several games of that with him as well. And I need to probably do an unboxing or re-unboxing or exploration of that game at some point to beef up my fantasy war game playlist. But needless to say, what a relatively influential friend on the gaming side. We played other games as well, but those are ones that jump to my memory. And this was a unique one in that it's kind of a war game, role-playing game. There's a lot of combat involved, but as you can tell here, it's very it's packaged in a very thematic way. You know, you have this controlled document, confidential, Morrow Industries training division, and you have these 3 different areas: science, Mars, recon, and it looks kind of like it's an official document from some kind of 80s government or 80s lab. And basically what the premise of this game was that that they've kind of saved people, selected certain people of different disciplines. You know, Mars was the warriors and science and recon, and you had these people that were, I believe it's like frozen, cryogenically frozen or preserved in event of a nuclear war or apocalyptic type situation. And you know, that's happened, and you're now brought to awakened or brought to the present day, and how these teams are dealing with that. So it's kind of a post-apocalyptic environment, and you know, role playing in that sense. So it's kind of interesting, a premise. And I picked this up again. This is published in 2017. I picked this up a couple years ago. Again, more of nostalgia of playing that with my buddy back in the day. And so it's pretty dense print here. Here's an introduction to the Morrow project, as you can see here on this page. In 1962, a mysterious man known as Bruce Edward Morrow, origin unknown, gathered 9 of the country's leading industrialists into an organization known as the Council of Tomorrow. And this organization brought forth the concept of the Morrow Project, an ambitious plan to cryogenically free special teams and equip to aid in the reconstruction of the U.S. after a nuclear war. Okay, so that's kind of all your premise, and there's some background on that. And then it has some background on the war, the targeting, the targets, and this would, you know, this is role playing, but this kind of fits into, again, I'm probably going to do a segment relatively soon, hopefully, on alt history, because this is like hypothetical, you know, what could have happened. There's a lot of games now in the war game space on alt history and, you know, hypotheticals and what could have happened. Which is kind of interesting, especially they're all targeted in the 80s. So the 80s are alive and new, which is fine for me. That's the most formative decade of my life, is the 80s. You know, grew up in the 70s, but the 80s was really when I was you know, a teenager and into college, and you know, just the culture, the music, and the games of that time period, and the Cold War all had an influence on me. And so those games resonate with me. So here's the targeting, and this is kind of interesting. This is interesting, background history. I grew up in Kansas City, so it was one of the targets. There was a Minuteman Air Force Base not too far outside, and there's Whiteman and Warrensburg. So that was one of the big targets there. So this is kind of interesting background material here. Pretty detailed, as you can tell. This is very dense in the background of the nuclear war that never happened, thank goodness. Here's talking about radiation, and then there was mutations, because you got to have mutations, right? What's no post-apocalyptic game, war game, role-playing game, or what have you is worth its salt if it doesn't have mutations. So then you got your character attributes. This is kind of how you roll up your character. It had these kind of different type of how you did your attributes. I mean, you could have psionic or mental power. Psionic, I'm referring back to D&D and Traveler, but telekinesis, telepathy, stuff like that. So there's all kinds of PSI type of abilities you can have as well. Here's your movement. Here's your different actions on here. So, typical role-playing fare, but as I said, it really is getting into the post-apocalyptic, and it definitely has a military or war game type bent to it, in that, the post-apocalyptic world's going to be savage and brutal, and you need to have a certain amount of skill in combat to survive and fight in that regard. And so you got a lot of weapons here and a lot of stats on the weapons. And again, to the extent, I'm not a big weapon guy, although I have a lot of games and played a lot of games that weapons were a big aspect of the especially the role-playing hobby. But I don't know how accurate some of these source materials are, but these are all source materials. So if you're looking for some more source materials, and then I'm going to be might be doing a piece a little bit later on another game or system or supplement that goes into a lot more detail than even this on some of the weapon systems and how they're used. But this is some good source material here, or I would assume it's probably good source material on some of the weapons and armaments that you might need to use in your post-apocalyptic world of the Morrow project. So you're getting some vehicles here, and it says the stats and stuff on that. Again, the layout of this is, I was such a fan of Traveler with the little books and the way the information was laid out. It just felt intuitive. This is very dense and very, small print, and kind of hard to, and I think the original, I didn't own the copy, my friend had it, and I think it was similar. I don't think they changed the layout too much on this, but man, this is very densely packed here. And so, and then look at it. You get an armor class chart. Look at that. Anybody that played any kind of war game or tank game in the 80s or 70s or 80s, you probably remember some, especially miniatures. There was some armor class and stuff like that especially for penetration and the like. And here you have your, whether it's steel, comparing it to steel, wood, concrete, or stone there. That's kind of interesting. Remember, I have a game, I could do a little bit of thing on that. It was a miniatures game on TAC Force, which was modern combat, alternative history. At the time, it was futuristic looking, right? It was made in the 80s, and it was for tank combat for the future conflicts, or current or future conflicts. Now it's one of those hypothetical games, right? And that's the amazing thing of war games and of time. It's something that would be futuristic looking is now hypothetical, just like the Next War series, is current and future looking on what the capabilities are, but in a matter of 10, 20 years, that will be hypothetical and a what if of what could have happened. So here's your damage and how damage is done and where it's done. So it's had a little bit of a detailed system on location of where you took your wound. So again, this is really focusing a lot on the combat aspect. Burn damage, so you got some really deep poisons. This is really getting into the combat of a post-apocalyptic world. And you got your vehicle. Here's edge projectile weapons, and then vehicle damage, and talking about how it affects the vehicles. Weather, special weather, and tornado movement. How many games do you have where you have rules on tornado movement? I guess the climate after the post-apocalyptic war, global warming or climate change probably was augmented or accelerated due to the nuclear war, and now we have all kinds of different weather out there. Here's age modifiers, and then NPC, fast kill, PC-NPC relations. So, again, this is all standard fare, but it's interesting how it's kind of, this is some different type of aspects and different type of charts that you don't see in all role-playing games. And these are just like some NPC characters, it looks like here. And here's some random counters. And there's a whole terrain and geographic area. So you got several charts here on how to set up your encounter. I don't know if there was any, I think they came out with supplements and submissions. Again, this I think was originally published in 1980, and then I think was republished like in 84 or some other versions. And then they might have had some scenarios and what have you. I was only familiar with the base game and this general book here. So I don't know if they came out with a lot of adventures or supplements or anything like that. This is mainly what I remember and what I call, and we just played a little bit of it. A lot of things what I did with in the 80s and I did with especially this one friend, but a lot of my friends, was just the concept and the ideas around this was fascinating, and actually started writing kind of a short story that I was going to hopefully turn into a kind of a series, and didn't get very far, but with this premise of, freezing people cryogenically, and then, they awaken into a new world and post-apocalyptic, and I was going to kind of overlay some, religious tones and tomes, kind of like the Book of Eli. No spoilers there, but put some of, but I was actually thought of that before the Book of Eli. They stole my idea, like always. All my best ideas were stolen. So I may spend a lot of time, with the concepts that were behind here. Here's a role play. Here's a Morrow project expansion here. The concepts, always sparked ideas, and I spent more time thinking about this stuff, and rolling up characters or goofing around with campaigns or environments than I did actually playing these games. Much like what I do today. So it hadn't changed over the years. Maybe once a dreamer, always a dreamer, right? Here's your data file. Here's how you fill out your chart for your different characters. And you got your freezing date there. So I would like to get back to that. I don't even know what I did with my notes, but I would like to get back to that concept of that idea of a novel set in this universe, and how it would play out, and a lot of blank pages there. And here's some of your skill charts for your characters. But as you can see, 1980, 1984, and 2017 there by Timeline Ltd. So I'd like to get back to that at some point. I just don't, with 3 kids and a job, and trying to get back into wargaming hobby a little bit more, and try to develop some contacts there, and exploring social media or YouTube with my wargaming hobby and some of my other hobbies. There's not a lot of time, right? Family and work take up a lot of the life pie trees or pie chart. So anyway, maybe I'll get to that sometime. Let me know if you guys are interested in that. I'll get some galleys out to you later in the week. Anyway, this was a page through of the Morrow project. I thought this was kind of an interesting little concept here. And again, I'm kind of in an RPG mood. I will get back to war games. I kind of took a little hiatus over the last few months. My son decided to get back into Magic the Gathering, and so he and I, when we go into something, we go into something heavy, or at least I go into something pretty heavy. So I've now cleaned off my wargaming table of all remnants of Magic the Gathering cards, and now I'm back into trying to get back into some gaming with my kids, and then some wargaming type activities as well. So promise more wargaming content in the future. But I pulled off some of these RPG books, and they're all from the 80s, and I thought, you know what, let's page through a few of them and see what's out there. And hope you guys enjoy this, and thanks for spending some time with me. If you guys are aware of this or know anything about this, or feel free to comment on it. Love to hear comments. Really appreciate your comments and your likes and your subscribes and just spending some time with me. Even if you don't do any of those things, just the fact that you watch this and spend a few moments is good enough for me. So thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for watching.